At Five Star Bank, community is at the heart of what we do. Every day we strive to have thoughtful solutions for our customers and help our communities prosper. Honest dialogue about the issues affecting the region is vitally important to that prosperity. We are proud to be part of the conversation and hope you'll join in.
SACOG, the Sacramento Area Council of Governments, adopted the preferred blueprint in 2004. It was a bold vision for growth that promotes compact, mixed-use development and more transit choices as an alternative to low-density development. How does a region come to have its neighborhoods, its roads, and civic amenities like parks and sports? Real estate development often happens more by chance than design. The result of poor planning decisions is gridlock on the freeways, overburdened local services, and frustrated residents. In response to these concerns, SACOG adopted the blueprint. Almost 10 years from its creation, many want to know what's working and what's next. Joining us today in partnership with the American Leadership Forum on Studio Sacramento are Sacramento Area Council of Governments Executive Director Mike McKeever, consultant Susan Frazier, and West Sacramento City Manager Martin Tuttle. So let's remind ourselves, what exactly is the blueprint?
The blueprint is a long-range growth vision for this region that was developed by the local leaders, the mayors and city council members, county supervisors, in concert with the civic sector, the development sector, about the right way to improve quality of life through future growth in the region.
And why does it matter?
Because you need a plan. I mean, the key in life is to develop a plan and then work the plan. So Blueprint was a plan to bring land use, transportation decisions to one forum and come up with, as Mike mentions, a vision for Sacramento region.
So when Mike says, Susan, that there were a bunch of elected officials, what are we talking about? I mean, one or two or three, or
no, the
who's involved?
The blueprint, it was really an unprecedented public outreach effort, and I think that there were some things that were so unique about it. One of them was that it was, I think, the first thing that was ever done with elected officials. Often civic things are done and handed to elected officials and say, please adopt this. This was done with elected officials all the way along. So when the final plan came out, there were no surprises in it. They were just part and parcel. Everything was done hand in hand.
Well, but with all due respect to the elected officials, a lot of times residents consider them to be the problem. So was the public involved at all in this?
The public was involved in a pretty unprecedented way as well.
Really?
So there were these workshops, and what was really, really transformative about them, above what was happening at the time, was that the normal process was stakeholder groups. So that meant that if Mike was an environmental advocate and Marty was a development advocate, then they would represent a group of people and come together. And those are great, but what happens is that because Mike wants to remain the trusted environmental person and Marty wants to remain the trusted development person, they have to stick to their guns to a certain extent. So you get something that's a little bit of agreement in the middle, but it tends to be kind of the lowest common denominator that they can all agree on.
Yeah.
And so what happened in Blueprint was that we set the table with people with all of those interests, but they were citizens instead of stakeholder groups. So we consciously said at every table we want 8 different seats at that table. 8 different groups, and some of them were historically underrepresented, and so we worked real hard to not only get them there, but to get them ready to be there. So pre-sessions to get them to understand the lingo, transportation, you name it. Translations, SACOG did wonderful translations for people with different languages. So we did everything we could to set a table that literally became a microcosm of the whole, every table.
And how many governments or parts of government's communities bought into this thing?
Well, there are 22 cities, 6 counties that ultimately adopted the blueprint, but the reason they did that, and it was a huge effort by Susan and her team at Valley Vision, over 7,000 people participated in that.
7,000?
7,000. Headed, kind of capped by 1,800 people at a regional forum that looked at the different alternatives on the vision for the future. And Mike did a great job by bringing some technology in from that he had developed in Portland so that people could get immediate feedback on different alternatives. That went to this forum. And then when elected officials at SACOG made their decision, they did it not in a vacuum, but they did it in the context of having really broad support from their communities.
But what I'm trying to wrap my arms around, Mike, is how does the existence of this thing make a difference in decision making that matters to me when I'm sitting on I-5 in the morning trying to get to my office?
Right. In a way, that question is indicative of the point of the whole process, which is we all go home and, go to sleep in our homes, in our neighborhood, on our block, but virtually everybody in this region lives in the region. They cross boundaries to go to work, they cross boundaries to go to church and to play and shop and recreate. So the blueprint was about understanding how all of those dots connect. And so when somebody builds a new home that's 30 miles away from their employer and they get on the freeway to drive for an hour to get to work every day, that affects not just their own lives, because they're spending a lot of time in a car, often frustrated because of the congestion, but it affects everybody between them and where they're driving to, because it's 4 or 5 communities could be affected by that. And
but isn't it also the case, though, that historically you got to go out 30 miles or 50 miles or 75 miles or whatever it is, because particularly for people of modest means, that's the only place that you can find affordable housing. The closer you're in or proximate to employment, the more expensive it is to live. So, I mean, is this only for the rich people?
No, I think what Blueprint did, and again with the technology of showing different alternatives, we took the demographics of where people are going to be in 20 years. We're going to be 20 years older. I mean, it's not a prediction. You see that you're going to be in 20 years. You're going to be 20 years older. And what are your needs? You're going to have a smaller household and so on. Looking at different housing choices and getting ahead of it, rather than let a few developers, land speculators around the region pick ag land and go to their city council or the board of supervisors and have that rezoned for housing. We step back and put it in context. What are the demographics? What are the needs? And where's the infrastructure? Where's the water? Where's the roads? What's the cheapest way to build housing? And I think that turned this region right around in terms of what's happening.
But you raise a good point, Martin. But I want to go to the fact that not in ag land being converted, okay? There was a controversy related to a place called Cordova Hills several months ago. And it was really the large discussion was about, do we convert more land that is quote unquote greenfield into housing and urban structures? Does the blueprint say that, look, forevermore, we are never going to allow greenfield development to take place?
Oh, no. It's a much more...
Well, that's what people are saying. I want you to understand.
It's not, I believe me, I get it. But it's not true. And one of the blueprint was a really honest investigation into what would be a good growth pattern for the region. There were no predetermined conclusions. And one of the key research questions was, what about future greenfield development? How much of it do we need, and where should it be, and what should it be like? And so the blueprint, about half of the future growth in the region is expected to be in greenfield development. We think there will still be people who want to have that kind of a lifestyle, but it's not your grandfather's subdivision. It will be...
How will it be different?
It will be, most of it will be located right immediately adjacent to the existing urban settlement pattern, so it'll be integrated in rather than a standalone off to the side type of development. It will be very pedestrian friendly.
In other words, not a patchwork.
Not a patchwork, but part of the gradual organic growth of the urban fabric of the region, so that we can, on the natural, provide the transportation with roads and transit and bike trails and walking systems. And then within it, there will be much more, instead of segregated use, the houses are all over here and we're purposely putting the jobs over here. It'll be much more integrated with the shopping down the street and the schools and the parks all walkable.
Really?
And that's the vision.
Really?
I mean, that's the vision was approved in 2004. But the vision didn't take any local land use authority
What's
away.
but what's the reality today as it's been implemented?
Well, what we've seen is we had a great recession. That slowed things down. But what we see today, for instance, in the West Sacramento, downtown, midtown core of this region, we have 30,000 units of housing that are planned. In West Sacramento, we have over 700 that are being in construction right today. So I would say Blueprint, we have to tip our hat to that vision. We're implementing it, not as quickly as we thought, because we had an unprecedented recession here.
Sure.
But I think we are moving along. And you know, again, as Mike said, there will be greenfield development, but I think the debate on the quality of that development has changed. I think.
Now,
It changed completely. The thing that was so different about this civically, because that's kind of the piece that I did, was that we did not sit there and say, here's a bunch of problems, what's your thought, your thought, your thought. We instead said, here's sort of a blank sheet of paper, or actually what we did at the beginning to make it personal was say, here's a little place in your neighborhood that you know about. What are the possibilities? So asking that what's the possibility question with data that came on the back end that said, oh, you liked that, well, here's what that means, really created a completely different kind of civic engagement that has raised the bar in the region for everything. So now when Marty wants to go do something, there's a lot higher expectation of the citizens that they're going to be engaged in a completely different way.
Really?
And Blueprint set the bar in a really different place about how you get people engaged in things, and it has carried through all the way through to this. It really brought citizen planners to the table, people that aren't stuck and can still listen to other people.
And it was really a together conversation with the elected officials and the
Yeah,
senior
that's a
staff.
big
And
deal.
your question earlier, your good question about, well, a lot of people point to the elected officials and say, well, they're the problem. That's very much indicative of the times that we live in, right? Where it's a very divisive era that we're living in, and democracy inherently is about the bringing together, that the people and their elected leaders are very closely connected. And it's difficult to find examples of really thriving, healthy democracy these days. And the Blueprint, even more than a great growth plan for the region, was a great experiment in democracy.
democracy is messy. It's kind of like the saying that everybody wants to get to heaven, but no one wants to die to get there.
Right.
And so democracy is messy, and we want to get to the result, but we don't really want to go through the process.
Right.
Right.
And I do think you have to have that process. You have to have that debate, and you have to have a common language so that when somebody says mixed-use development, people understand that. And I think the
Right.
Blueprint process did raise the bar among elected officials to have a common language, civic leaders to also be able to understand that. And this recent issue you mentioned of Cordova Hills, I think, is a great opportunity to restate where are we headed, because it appears the economy's coming back, and here's a great opportunity to work that plan that we did in 2004.
All right. Now, the people who supported that particular development have made a very forceful case that that land, nothing would grow on it anyway, and it was not appropriate for agricultural use and all that. And we don't need to relitigate that particular issue. But as more of a sort of starting point, a launch point for a broader discussion, it does raise an economic development question that now is part of other conversations. And that is that one of the sectors that this region sees poised for the most growth is in food and ag, because of the proximity of the university, and we have a lot of good land around us, right? How is it that the Blueprint is going to help all of us make better decisions in the future as to the trade-off between where it is that we're consuming that land for needed housing and where we leave it in production, because that's one of the few areas we have a true competitive, sustainable advantage?
I think it's a great question, and planning is always constant. You can't sit on a 2004 plan because things do change. The value of ag products has increased. I think you need to continue to revisit this issue. But there are projects that are in play. They're going through the approval process. They will be built. But you need that ongoing discussion about how do you continue to tweak your plan. And I think that's a great stakeholder role.
the 31 elected leaders on the SACOG board, this is a bit of an overstatement, but almost immediately after they unanimously adopted the blueprint strategy in December of 2004, they launched what we call the Rural-Urban Connections strategy, which was designed to gain as much understanding of the economics and the quality of life issues in the rural and agricultural part of the region as we had in the urbanized part of the region through the blueprint proper. And that project has actually gained, the blueprint created quite a stir statewide and nationwide.
How so?
Well, because of the consensus, the broad outreach and the consensus that had been reached across development sector to citizen activists to environmentalists and builders, and people were stunned. How did everybody agree to do this? That was the aha brand that was created
and
for
land
this.
use were finally
We're
linked.
finally
They were linked.
married in a serious way. But the rural connection is twofold. If we implement the blueprint, we will use much less land for urbanization for the same amount of big population and employment growth. And that on the natural takes farmland out of the path of urbanization. But the Rural-Urban Connections strategy, and now the Metro Chamber and Valley Vision and SACDO have created a regional economic development plan, the next economy. And one of its pillars, as you well know, is growing the agricultural economy. And so that's the positive step of what can we do to help farmers who grow in one of the best places in the world to produce food to do even better.
Okay, but share with us an example of something that has happened in this region, or two or three that are spread out, that has happened in this region because of the fact that the blueprint helped guide that particular circumstance.
Well, can I jump in on this, and then I'll give a big number. And it's not all because of the blueprint, but it's a marriage of the blueprint and other public policies and the private market doing what private markets do, which is respond to consumer preferences and demand. When the blueprint started, and I had just moved from Portland, Oregon down here, I remember this like it was yesterday. The Sacramento Housing and Redevelopment Agency was all excited because for the first time in literally decades, there was a proposal to build new housing in downtown Sacramento. It was something like 125 units was the proposal. And their rules and common sense said they had to go get a market study and see whether anybody would actually want to live in those 125 units. And they had just gotten the study back, and they were excited because it showed there was actually demand for 150
Wow.
new housing units in downtown.
Ooh.
And they were elated, and I'm thinking, holy cow. Before the bottom fell out of the economy, in downtown Sacramento, the rail yards, the River District, Midtown, and inner West Sacramento either built, coming out of the ground, entitled, or seriously in the entitlement process, were 45,000 units of housing. Now, we all know those are not built yet, okay? But to go from the people thinking there's a demand for 150 to 45,000 units is phenomenal.
Okay, but that once again raises the bigger issue. If I live in El Dorado Hills, or I live somewhere in Yolo County that's more rural, why do I even care?
Because you should care, because what is the future of your home? I mean, what's the future of your investment in your home, in your property? What's your kids and your grandkids' lifestyle going to be? And to come up with a long-range plan, go out 50 years, what's the Sacramento region going to look like? How's the Sacramento region going to compete with other regions around the country, around the world? What is our game plan? This provided a forum for us to come up with that vision.
And what he's saying is exactly why it was so powerful. We didn't say what kind of planning decisions you want. We said, where do you think you want to live when you're 75? Where do you want your kids to live? Do you want them to have affordable housing? Do you want them to be able to walk here? We asked lifestyle questions to
What kind
people.
of amenities do you want?
But Susan, respond to the question as to why it is that government should be involved in this at any level. You know, some would say this is a bunch of soft-headed sort of industrial planning, where it is that if you just let the private sector prevail, the market will decide where it is that things are going to go, and we'll deal with it.
Well, we kind of had that going on before Blueprint.
Yeah, and you can't discount the role of government with the subsidies that federal, state, local money goes into infrastructure. That public money needs to be assured that it's a good investment. And that's where the transportation funding and land use need to be linked together so that it is a good investment.
You know, I'm going to go back to my democracy theme. The whole system of being that we have created in this country here is about the right balance of private rights and individual freedom and liberty and the common good. Things that we can only realize when we act together. And it's not one or the other, it's finding the right balance of the two that allows us to dance instead of step on each other. And there isn't a private developer in this town who thinks that they can do it all on their own. Okay, they might make the argument.
As a private developer, I will attest
okay.
that is true.
They might make the argument when they think it's to their advantage to talk about the property rights and the liberty side of the argument, but they know they need the partnership.
But you understand the
sector.
skepticism whenever something that has government involvement comes along as to whether or not the private sector thinks it's going to be helpful.
Well, yes, I do understand the skepticism, but I'm not going to become depressed or cynical by it, because we have to stay focused on how to make it all work, not all of the reasons that can make it fail.
You know, Scott, I would just want to say, I know there's that view out there, but I know in our city, in West Sacramento, in my travels, both in the city and outside, they say that the city council, the city's done a great job of planning. There is a clear path. In fact, we had a vote last November about post redevelopment, what we were going to do with our property tax revenue. Should we change directions? And 87% of the voters said no, continue on the path that you're on. So, you know, I think.
And what did that say to you?
That said to me that at least in West Sacramento, there is a vision, there's a game plan. It's backed up with credibility in terms of actually being implemented. You see that in the area around Rayleigh Field, around Tower Bridge. People can see the streets, utilities in. You can see how we are poised for the economy coming back. They like that. We're taking advantage of the assets that we have, the Great River, our proximity to downtown Sacramento.
So it's leadership. I mean, people are
So I think,
hungry
yeah.
for leadership, and the West Sacramento leaders are providing leadership.
And what happens next? What's next?
Well, that's a really, I've been thinking about that question a lot. And a lot of what needs to happen next is getting better and better at implementation and more focused on implementation. A lot of things that
Such as?
to common citizens, ordinary citizens, are sort of boring. But, you know, we've talked about the issues around the urban fringe of the region. But what I like to talk about is, what do we need to do to help the developers and the builders to succeed in the areas that the blueprint really wants to focus on, the inner areas. And it's not all about downtown Sacramento and West Sacramento, you know, redevelopment.
And a lot of people that live out in El Dorado, Folsom, Placer, they want to know that.
And
Right.
El Dorado County is a great example. That Board of Supervisors over the last few years has amended their zoning code to promote more mixed-use zoning. They've done things to protect their vibrant agricultural economy in the foothills. It's a different economy than Yolo County. They're working hard to grow an employment center at the far western end of the county, which the more jobs they can get there, the shorter commutes that they're going to have. It's a different flavor than in downtown Sacramento.
And you see that in Roseville, you see that in Yuba City with a focus on downtown. I want to say one thing though. I think for all this and for the general public to have increased confidence, I think the new arena, this regional facility for the Kings, if that gets built as planned with a streetcar, I think that's going to be a tremendous boon to the confidence of this region. I think it will take us to the next level. So we all ought to be rooting for
right.
Sacramento to pull that off.
And Susan, I'm going to give you the final word. What is it that is missing that needs to get done next?
I think we should re-engage the citizens again. I think it's time to let them know a progress report on all the hard work that they did. Like Marty said, 7,000 people spent evenings with maps in front of them doing a lot of really great work. And I would love to see those people invited back to the table for the next phase.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Scott.
That's our show. Thanks to our guests and thanks to you for watching. For Studio Sacramento, I'm Scott Syfax. See you next time right here on KVIE.
At Five Star Bank, community is at the heart of what we do. Every day we strive to have thoughtful solutions for our customers and help our communities prosper. Honest dialogue about the issues affecting the region is vitally important to that prosperity. We are proud to be part of the conversation and hope you'll join in.
All episodes of Studio Sacramento, along with other KVIE programs, are available to watch online at kvie.org/video.